Hello, everybody. I am delighted to be here with Martha Hall Kelly. I am Lauren Fox, and I will be interviewing Martha and talking about her brilliant new novel, Sunflower Sisters. And we thought we would get started. Okay, would you like to start by just giving us a brief description of Sunflower Sisters, the plot?
Sure, sure. Basically, what that video talked about was the three books. How my first book was Lilac Girls, and I think a lot of people know about Lilac Girls already. It was about Caroline Ferriday, and she has a beautiful, or had, she passed away sadly in the 1990s, but I discovered her when I went up to her home, her former home that's now a museum, and it's called the Bellamy Faraday House and Gardens. And I love lilacs, and that's why I went up there. And then I discovered this incredible story of the Ravensbruck Rabbits. They were nicknamed the Rabbits. They were Polish women, very young, who 14 to 25 years old, that were experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp in Germany. Once Caroline found out about them, she brought them to the US for rehabilitation and the trip of a lifetime. So that's what Lilac Girls was about. And then the second book goes back in time, and it's about Caroline's mother and how she brought people over, women over that had lost everything in the Bolshevik Revolution. That's called Lost Roses. And then the third book is Sunflower Sisters. And that's about Caroline's, oh, you have a copy. That's so nice. It's about Caroline's great grandmother, Jane Eliza, and that's what the video talks about, is the family tree and her relationship to Caroline. And so it was Caroline's great grandmother, and I feel like all of Caroline's wonderful philanthropy and all the good things that she did all kind of came from Jane Eliza. And Jane Eliza had seven daughters and one son. And it was really hard choosing which of those daughters to focus on, because I usually write from the points of view of three different characters. And so I chose the middle daughter, Georgeanna, because she had this fight to become a nurse for the Sanitary Commission in the Civil War. So I loved her story. And I thought she was just, I mean, for the time, such an empowered woman. And it's all because her mother taught her daughters to be so strong. And then the other two characters are fictitious. Georgie and her family is all real. I read all these letters that are in the archives to create the scenes in the book. So they're all based on true story. And they were staunch abolitionists. So I thought, I really need an enslaved character. And then I wanted to have the mistress of a plantation. So that's Anne May, the mistress. And then Jemma is the enslaved girl on the plantation. So that is Sunflower Sisters.
It's so hard to describe what your book is about, and because it lives in your head for such a long time. And that's I was like hanging up laundry this morning, thinking if I had to describe this, what would I say? And it's just absolutely an epic. It just you did such a beautiful job weaving the three perspectives and showing us the bigger picture of the war and slavery, and then honing in on these little conflicts and details that just like propel the story forward. And I just have to say, I can't remember the last book where I would get to the end of a chapter and the cliffhanger was so intense that occasionally I had to flip forward and read and get to that character's section just to know, like I couldn't read the next chapter without knowing if whatever was about to happen actually happened. So I mean, this is just like beyond, oh, I mean, I'm not just saying because I'm here interviewing you. It is fantastic. So anybody, if you just popped into our conversation with a little speck of interest in this book, run out now and buy it. So let me just, I have so many more questions than we can fit in the next 40 minutes. So
I'll be quick then when I answer.
Yeah, no, don't. So what was this book is also impeccably researched. And I was wondering, what was the biggest surprise or the most unusual discovery that you made in your research for this book?
Wow. There were so many. It's hard to say. You know, for each character, there were definite surprises. But I'd say with Jemma, I thought I knew what slavery was all about. And, you know, we've studied it in school. But once I started digging in from a female point of view and really get to, you know, the nitty gritty in terms of just everyday life for an enslaved person, oh my goodness, it was just a million times worse than I thought than I thought. And I really wanted to bring that to the reader because I was curious myself. What was it really like day to day to be enslaved on a plantation? And it was just, I mean, I've written about concentration camps and the Bolshevik Revolution, which was just, horrible. But to slavery, I felt like I learned so much. And I put it all in the book. I wanted people to really feel like they had been there. And also from the plantation mistress's point of view, too. I mean, I thought that it was a pretty, I mean, I'd seen Gone with the Wind and all the usual. And I just thought, oh, a plantation mistress, it's got to be just like they sit around and maybe do some sewing. But that was certainly not the case. And my novel is set in Maryland, which was a border state on a tobacco plantation. And the men all go off to war, so the women are left there. And so that really surprised me, too. The whole how hard it was to run a plantation. And so, and then Georgie, a lot of the things in Georgie's chapters surprised me too, in terms of being an author back then. She wrote a book called 3 Weeks at Gettysburg, and she was not allowed to do any kind of promotion of it. It was kind of borderline not okay in society to write a book if you're a woman. And her sister Mary wrote poems, and she was never allowed to say that she wrote them because people just assumed a man wrote them because, God forbid. But so those are just some of the things that surprised me.
Related to that question, I found myself enthralled as much by the broader historical context as by the minor, kind of seemingly minor details that accumulated to kind of paint a picture of the era. Anne May, the mistress of the plantation, has something called a dress elevator, which right, like I mean, it's sort of like a pulley almost, where she can pull up a long dress.
Yeah, you attach it to the bottom. And so if you come to a puddle, say, because they had those giant hoop skirts and you couldn't really navigate around streets and things unless you had that. It was it was very popular. And you would just pull it up and it like lifts up your skirts just a little bit.
And then I could not get the image out of my mind of Anne May's mother sleeping with slices of rare beef on her face to keep her skin looking youthful. That sort of did me, and I just paused for a minute.
I love all those little details. And,
yeah.
Just how they use their makeup. And yeah, they actually did that. And, they said it worked. I'm not going to try it, but
we're not going to find out.
No, not firsthand.
And Jemma, the enslaved girl, has a sort of encyclopedic knowledge of herbs and plants that she uses to and that the people around her use to cure sickness and treat injuries. And I thought that was really interesting too, just the way that the sort of Western medicine, or like the medical community interacted with Jemma's knowledge. And she was able, and in one case in particular, she healed somebody who was on death's door with her knowledge of herbs and plants. And I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, I love that part. Once I kind of delved into that whole medicinal herbs thing, I loved that. And her grandmother, not by blood, because so often an enslaved family, was never intact. But this woman, Sally Smith, that she considers to be grandmother, is really, really good with plants, and that's how she learned it. But I'm really interested to try some of those. But so many have bad names, like devil's dung. I
was
don't know
going to say.
But they worked, I'm sure. And just over the years, we've lost that. Now we rely on traditional medicine, but I'm sure they work.
So I would like to talk to you about your choice to write from the perspective of three very different women. And I just want to hear your thoughts about those three different perspectives, if you wouldn't mind. But I'm particularly interested in how challenging it must have been to write from Jemma's perspective, the perspective of a 16, 17-year-old enslaved Black girl. I was really like, my antenna went up when I saw that you were attempting to do this. And I feel like you achieved something kind of remarkable. And I'd love to hear. I mean, I would love to hear about the challenges, and if you must have had outside input, or just help honing in on her point of view. So
no, not really. Well, what I have done in my other books. Usually have, that character like Kasha in Lilac Girls, who was one of the so-called rabbits. Um, I feel like if I do enough research and the right kind of research, I feel like I can really get into that 16-year-old girl's head. And the same thing
Mhm.
with the peasant girl in Lost Roses. Um, she was more kind of the villain. And in this, I did a lot of research. I lived in Atlanta at the time, so I went to plantations, former plantations that were museums, and I read a ton written in the period. I really found that um, reading, not books about the Civil War, but written during the Civil War, just to
Mhm.
get that voice and to understand what it was like to be enslaved. One of the best books that let's see if I have it in my pile here, was Harriet Jacobs' Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. And
Mhm.
once I read this, I really felt like I had her voice in a way. Harriet Jacobs, just briefly, was enslaved in North Carolina, and she was owned by a young woman whose brother-in-law was a doctor and was madly in love with Harriet. Harriet was very beautiful. Um, and he built a house for her in the woods, and he wanted to just like keep her there like a concubine. And she was so terrified that that was going to happen, as you can imagine, and she had two young children. And so she decided to go up into um, her aunt's home, who was freed at the time, and live in like a coffin-sized room for 2 years. And her aunt would bring her food every day. She watched her children walk off to school every morning, and they were told that she had left them. And so I just, once I read her story, Gemma just came alive. But I read lots of, different accounts. And I think that's the way that I did it for the rabbits too, for in Lilac Girls and the other book, Lost Roses. I feel like once I get to the point where I'm in that headspace, it's pretty easy. Not easy, but it feels right. But I also was really careful not to make her, I mean, from reading it, she can read and write. She's more empowered, I think, than some other characters have been in other books, because she was owned previously by a woman named Aunt Tandy Rose, who taught her to read and write, even though it was against the law, so that Gemma could read Aunt Tandy Rose the Bible and some racing novels too. And I found that in another account that actually happened. So I felt like as long as I gave her agency and treated her like the other characters, then I would be fine. And it's funny, no one has said anything about that. So I think they feel like, I did my due diligence, which I did for all the characters. I feel like it's really important too for Anne May, the plantation mistress. I felt really like it was very important to do a lot of research on that too, because I love to make my characters not just evil or good. I think Gemma does some things that are not, I mean, I think if you're going to treat them all equally, they all have to have flaws and things. I mean, Georgie
Mhm.
has flaws as well. So I think that's what makes an interesting character.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do feel like like I said, I do feel like you achieved something remarkable. I just thought, like, how did you have like, well, what about NA? What about Gemma's sort of polar opposite? Did you just, was it the same process? Like, she would almost be a more difficult character to inhabit because she's very cruel.
Yeah. Well, I just have to access the cruel part of myself. As a writer, we just,
Yeah.
dig in and,
No.
pull it out. People say that about Lilac Girls and Herta Oberhauser, who was the Nazi doctor in the book. And I just thought, how did a woman operate on these young girls? How, like, what could the motivation possibly be, or the justification? So that's what, to dig into Herta was really interesting. And a lot of people have
Mhm.
said, how did you like get into her head? But, I think you just do, I love writing from first person point of view, and you just access that stuff that's in you that, Herta was, you know, kind of brought up on National Socialism. She really drank the Kool-Aid. So in this case, I kind of went back to that well again with Anne May and really tried to get into her head, like, how could you justify owning other human beings and treating them so horribly? She really is awful to them. And so I had to go back a little bit into her New Orleans upbringing. Her father was murdered by an insurrection, a slave uprising. So, I mean, she's got some demons. And also, when you meet her mother, oh my God, her mother is awful. And I think you kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. You know, and the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, the minor characters in this book are really something. Like they're just, you sort of like spend a couple pages with them and you have this, and then they illuminate the central characters really well. And Anne May's mother was one of those. Like you wouldn't have wanted to spend a whole book with her, but just understanding her kind of gave you like unlocked a door into Anne May.
Yeah, and her brother too, I think, because her brother's lovely. He does great things for the enslaved. He wants to build Sally Smith a window, and I love him as a character, and she loves him too, Anne May does. So I think you see, some kind of glimmers of humanity in her. So she's not 100% horrible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is it a spoiler? I don't want to give anything away, but is it a spoiler to say what side he fights on?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, so he fights for the South because even though he believes in ending slavery, he believes in its in a sort of evolutionary approach to it. And I was like, no, Harry.
I know, but there were a lot of Confederate soldiers that fought, even though they didn't 100% believe in slavery, in keeping slavery. They felt like states' rights were really important. So I wanted to kind of show that it was a lot more complicated than some people think. Yeah. Oh, Harry. We can't really say what happens to Harry. But Anne May's husband marches off too and fights for the Union Army for the North. So I don't think she really cared about that.
No.
In some ways, she's a little bit like Scarlett O'Hara in terms of, Scarlett like marries men and doesn't really care if they die. I think in Anne May's case, Fergus, she kind of was like, whatever happens to him, whatever. But then once he goes off and fights, she's left with the bulk of the work on the farm, and not good. Let's just say her work ethic is not super great.
I mean, it's clouded by certain other issues that are going on for her.
She's not addict too, so that's tough. Hate it when that happens.
How about Georgie? How is it like? I mean, I feel like she's like almost the most modern feeling character. So I was just thinking when I was thinking about what questions to ask you, that like if I had written this book, which I couldn't have written this book, but if she would have been like the most easily accessible, she would have been the most easily accessible for me. Did you feel that way?
Huh. I hate to say it, but Anne May was pretty accessible. I know, I'm just a person, I think, down deep. It was fun to write Anne May because she's just, to be able to do all the terrible things. Georgie was hard, I have to be honest, because there are so many letters in in Caroline Faraday's archives, and I had to read them all and keep track of them all. And there's 7 sisters, and that's where all the scenes in Georgie's chapters come from, actual real life events. For example, the book opens at a slave market in Charleston, and they were just there on a social visit down from New York, and they stumble upon a slave market, and they start talking to a woman through the gate because women were not allowed in. And they start talking to a woman that has a baby with her, and they're selling her children as they're watching. So it's just, I mean, that letter, when I read it, I just thought, oh, I have to put this in there. So that was the hardest part because everything in there is from letters. And the other ones, like Anne May, I could just say, I do these really detailed outlines. And so with Anne May, I could just go through and write, whatever scenes I wanted to write. But with Georgie, they all had to be based on truth.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you my book that just came out in February uses real letters and I weave them through the book. And I think that in a way, I sort of had a conversation with the letters, like a little detail would come out in the letter and then a whole scene would blossom. And I mean, so it sounds like that was a similar process for you. Like you'd read something in the letter that would spark something, and then you'd have a whole, then you'd be able to create the fictional version of what you read in the letters. Does that sound kind of like how it was for you?
Exactly, exactly. And how helpful that is because otherwise we're sitting around thinking, oh, what kind of a scene. But when you've got a letter like that, it really like just starts things going right away. What's the name of your book?
Oh, it's called Send for Me. And
We need to
it's got,
do you have a
yeah, I
copy of
mean, well, of course I do. Here it is. And it uses it's my great grandmother's letters weaved throughout the book.
Can I see
But
the cover one more time? What is on the
yes,
cover? Oh, what a beautiful photograph.
isn't it a beautiful cover? I know. But
Yeah, it's
we can
gorgeous.
talk about that another time. Not
Okay,
we can.
I know. Sorry, I'm ADDing.
No. I just want to talk about. I'm going to run out of time. Um, okay. So here I have a question about your research process. When you started researching this book, what story did you think you wanted to tell, and did it change as you continued the process and started writing it?
It did. That's such a great question. It did change. I thought I had it all together. And whenever people say, "Oh, I'm a pantser," I
And
don't plot it out. I always go, "How can you do that?" But in this case, it did because again, back to slavery, I thought I'm going to have this family that does this, and then it did kind of like take on a little bit of a life of its own. That doesn't usually happen to me. Usually, sometimes there's like a new scene or whatever that it surprises me, but this definitely, like, once things started rolling, it just kind of got out of control. And I think that was kind of a metaphor for the way that slavery was. Once I introduced LeBaron Carruthers, who's the overseer, and he and his patty rollers, they called them. They were like the beginning of the Ku Klux Klan. Once I brought them into the mix, it just like I could not add certain things that really made it explosive. Georgie's chapters, I think, were more because I did have to kind of plug them in because of the letters. Those didn't really her life didn't really change that much. Although her relationship with Frank Bacon, he's the love interest in it, that did kind of change because oftentimes I have my daughters read and my husband too, read my first chapters. And my daughters just kept saying, more Frank Bacon. They help me steer the ship a little bit. And they're always saying, more. I had a lot of lint making in at the beginning, and they were like, "Mom, way too much
no.
lint." And so they keep me, because I was interested in how did they make lint? Lint was bandages. How did they make that? They like scraped their household, like they would take their clothing and scrape it into lint. I thought that was fascinating, but they were like, "No, thank you. We don't want to know that much about lint." So they're super helpful, but this time they were like, "I want more of that of Jemma's family and all of
Yeah.
that." So that was helpful.
Frank, so Georgie is a powerhouse, and Frank gives her so much nuance. And I mean, relationships, no matter, romantic or familial or friendships, always obviously do act upon the main character in that way. But Frank was again, without giving too much away, the relationship, the developing and changing and complicated relationship between Georgie and Frank really gives her like shadow and depth, and in a really nice way. And it was
Thank
one
you.
of the yeah. I mean, it was it was interesting to see. I wish we could. I wish the audience could just mute, and then I could just tell you all the things I think about the end of the. But I won't. I promise. But
Oh, the
I love,
I'd love to know.
just like, or just how everything turns out. And it's hard to talk about this book without talking about the way things take shape and conclude. But I promise I won't. So anyway, Frank, very interesting.
Yeah, and a
um,
real person. So
and a real person.
yes,
Is that what you're
right.
saying? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm curious to know because like I said earlier, I like lived with this book for the whole week. Um, I'm wondering how the intense research affected you. I mean, you talked a little bit about it, just being able to get into like access some of the ugliness and then leave it. But did you feel like, was it hard for you to dip in and out of these characters? Did they live with you? Was it hard? Was it's such a difficult period in American history? Obviously, was it a difficult emotional process for you, or were you kind of like, okay, I work from 9 to 5, and then I go hang out with my family? Or how did that go for you?
I always think that they're not affecting me, and then I think they definitely do, but I'm not self-aware enough. I don't know. I don't always go, oh, I'm depressed because I just wrote this really sad thing. Like my son, one time when I was writing about it with Lilac Girls down in Atlanta, I picked him up for high school, and he said, "Mom, have you been writing Herta chapters? You know, the terrible Nazi doctor?" And I said, and I had been, and I was like, I was being crabby, I guess. But yes, I do think that it affects me, but
Yeah.
this book more, definitely. I cried a lot when I was writing it. And I'm not a big, when I'm writing, I'm not a big crier. But one day my husband came in and said, "What is wrong?" And I was just like, I think I was writing the end, which is, it's the end of 3 books about Caroline's family, and I'm not writing any more about them. So, it was emotional, but I think it's also that it's civil war and it's our country. The other books were about Nazi Germany and the Bolsheviks in Russia, and this is personal. And yeah, wow. So yeah, I think just the actual writing of it was more emotional. But in terms of like writing Anne May, I do have the ability to just kind of do it and seemingly go about my business. I should probably be in therapy or something so that, I could get a doctor to tell me, you're messed up. But to me, I feel, I don't think that it affects me really that much.
And can your husband come over, stand over your shoulder and tell us the truth? My husband will be like, you were cranky for like 3 months in 2019. And like, it's hard to see it. And I just think I'm fine. I'm just working.
Yeah, for me, but I totally, yes, my husband would definitely tell you the real truth. But I think, yeah, he can tell more. That's exactly right. But I don't know. I think that it's more the business of writing that gets me
Yeah.
cranky and freaked out, not the actual writing. It's more like the book's coming out in 2 weeks, and you know, someone wrote a review on Goodreads that says, something bad. And I mean, the reviews have been, thank God, knock on wood, really good. But when one person says something, I'm just like, ah. So, it's more that for me that
Oh,
gets
I
me
know.
kind of like freaked out, because what people don't realize is, we read that, although I don't that much anymore. My husband reads them for me because I just take it so personally. One time with Lilac Girls, a woman um, emailed me, I don't, or texted me or something. I don't know. We were friends on Facebook or something. But I didn't really know her. And she sent me a message saying, "You are a sick person that you wrote this book, Lilac Girls. I got to the concentration camp part and I threw it across the room, the book. And how could you write this?" And that night, I drank a little more wine than usual. And then, the next day I was just like, you try to do a good thing in life, no good deed. And then the next day, she sent me another message and said, "Oh, by the way, I picked up the book again and I loved it. I finished it." And I was just like, really? I
Thank you
mean,
so much. That's so sweet.
oh, I'm so glad. But, I went through a night of like, oh my God. So I think people don't realize that, we're humans. And yeah, that part of it is a little tougher. But in terms of getting into the head of a character, I think probably Gemma was the one that was the hardest because, she goes through the
Mhm.
hardest stuff.
Yeah. I broke up with Goodreads. I mean, I'm still happy it exists, and I'm glad that people,
How did you
use that
break
as a
it up?
forum. I just don't do it. I just don't go on anymore. I mean, I just don't read those reviews anymore because you can read 10 amazing reviews and they kind of like, like water off your back. And then, oh, are we hearing that feedback?
No, I just
Oh,
turned off. I had my alerts on and I turned it off.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like it's time to stop talking now. Anyway, I was going to say you get one negative review and it just affects you. I mean, it can really set you back and stop you from writing for a while. So,
And who knows why that person wrote that too? Like what's
right,
going,
right,
like are they
right.
jealous that you wrote a book, or, there could be a million things.
Um, what, wait, I just have too many more questions for you. Uh, okay, I told you earlier that I hate this question, so you don't have to answer it. But what is next for you?
I love this question because I'm
Okay,
always,
good.
because I finished this book maybe, gosh, a while ago. And then I started working on my two new books, which I had pitched to Random House like 2 years ago. And I was so excited when they said, yeah, dude, that sounds good. And the next one is a Cold War book. So it's still historical fiction. And it shares some characters with Lilac Girls, weirdly. Not Caroline or any of the main characters, but, well, actually one of the main characters. But yeah, so it's two women, one American and one French girl, who were former prisoners at Ravensbruck. And something really bad happened to them because of this one doctor. So when they are liberated and they go home, they go on this quest to hunt him down around the world. They go to Vienna, Rome, Paris, South America, trying to hunt him down. And it's kind of a suspense novel,
Mhm.
and can't tell you what happens, obviously, but I think it's really interesting. It's only two point of view characters, and I think reading from the point of view of an American that was at Ravensbrück has been really interesting, and a French girl, and they were young. So that's been really interesting. And then because they find out like what there's a lot of secrets and stuff in it. And then the next book is a real suspense novel set in my hometown. And it is, yeah, really, really scary and set in my own house, actually. And so I've been scaring myself to death and reading way too many thrillers just to like figure out how to write a thriller. But yeah, so that's been really, really fun. I feel like for me, writing that is so much quicker and easier. And, it just moves along so quick. And I think people will like that one too. So
Yeah, and you're
first I
not.
paperback for this next year. And then Golden Doves comes out the next year. And, so it's a process, but I've already got them, in the pipeline. So it's good.
That's amazing. And the thriller, like you don't have to be, if it's contemporary, you're not sort of consumed with making sure you get every historical detail correct. So I'm guessing that it is a faster paced writing process.
So much. Yeah. And I'm starting to go, wow, this is what, writers that write this kind of fiction, it must be so much fun because you don't have to look up what kind of carriage was that, or, did they have
Right.
electricity? Yeah.
Or what
I'm
kind of
trying
shoe.
to, I'm
I'm
trying
sorry,
to
what?
answer quickly, but it's not working. I'm just, incapable of being succinct, I think.
That's all the better for your readers. Um, okay, back to I don't I think I'm keeping a diligent eye on the time. We have a little bit more time left. So who was your in Sunflower Sisters? Who was your favorite minor character?
Ooh, oh wow. That's really hard. I love the minor characters in this. I love Sally Smith,
Me too.
Jemma's grandma. I love, love, love her. And she has a wonderful backstory. Um, like a real person backstory. And I also really like Euphemia, who is Aunt May's sister, who she's so terrible to. But Euphemia is kind of long suffering, but I do love her. And I love the scene where she goes to the church fair and has a picnic camper that, they're supposed to raffle off. They're basically
Mhm.
the single ladies in town. They're trying to like get them married. And everybody else's picnic baskets get bought. But, so I love that scene and I love Euphemia. And then in terms of um, uh, Georgiana's chapters, I think her sister Mary is my favorite of all of the sisters, other than Georgie, just because her story is. I just love her story, and she was the beauty of the family. You know, back then they actually said that, which is but I just loved her from her letters and just getting to know her, even though she had been gone for a century. Um, over a century. I thought she was just a really lovely person. So, who was your favorite?
My favorite minor character was Georgie's parlor skates. I'm just kidding. I loved those parlor skates though, and I was like, where can we get our hands on those?
No, isn't that so funny that they used to skate in the house?
I can't really imagine a house because I live in a little bungalow. I can't imagine a house big enough that would require skating from room to room. But I just like that just like popped for me. That was brilliant. I love those. And yeah, I mean Sally Smith was a poignant and lovely character. And I loved reading about her in the author's note too. You know, the truth of her. Oh, we have
I think they're
somebody just
telling us
asked.
5 minutes and we can have
Yeah,
questions.
but somebody asked if it would be possible to see the video, the one that I somehow managed to screw up, someplace else later because it looked really interesting. It is really interesting. Is there a way that people can access it? Do you
I
know?
think, probably when the tour is over, they're going to put it on my website.
Oh, good.
But I don't, there have been some, if you go to my website and look on the events that have happened, the other events, oftentimes they are saving the event. And at the very beginning, you can see the video.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, but anyway, yeah, I'm keeping my eye on the time and the question. So we still have a little bit more. Do you have what's your, when you're writing, do you have a writing group or do you have like a passel of trusted readers or who reads as you're writing or do you just appear from a dark hole with a 500-page manuscript in hand?
Wouldn't that be so nice? No, my husband reads and he drops everything. He's got a very busy career, but he's so great. He drops everything and reads my chapters, especially he loves the Civil War, so he really wanted to do that with this book. And then my daughters, they're 32 and 30, and they are they're so good. If I have a whole hunk of a book, I can send it. And my one daughter, Mary, she's an actor. She lives out in LA. She loves reading and giving me notes, and she's a really, really good editor. So that's super helpful. And then my other daughter, Catherine, is also super helpful too, but in a different way. It's almost like two different editors. And then there's my husband, who is, very different too. So I feel like I have three editors at home. So it's really, really nice.
My husband is an English professor, so I don't give him my chapter to ensure that they're good because if he just, raises his eyebrow, I'm like, oh no, it's terrible. So I wait a long time before I let him read my stuff.
Yes,
So
probably good anyway.
somebody asked, what is something you do to help when you are stuck in the writing process? Oh, that's a good question.
Ooh, is that a writer? Can they tell us? I would love to know.
I can't tell.
I really like to write in scenes, and I feel like that is the secret sauce for me anyway, because when I first started writing, it was just narrative summary, and I just thought, this is how you write. And then I realized, for me anyway, it really helps it come alive if it's a scene. So if I am working on a scene, and so I should show you my outline, but once I have that outline and I feel like I've got all the scenes, I just pluck them out and start, writing the scene. And if it doesn't, if I have what some people would call writer's block, I blame it on the scene and I just get rid of the scene or I change the scene somehow to maybe there's not enough conflict, maybe add weather, add change the setting, if it's so that's what I do to I don't believe in I can't believe in writer's block for myself because once that gets in my head, and I think, oh, I'm
Mm.
blocked, I don't know what's going to happen. So that's kind of how I take care of it. I don't do the thing where writers say I'm writing 10,000 words a day or whatever. I don't even know how many words that would be really. I don't like to put that on myself because then I don't know. I'm a contrarian a little bit. Then I'll be like, I don't feel like writing 10,000. I don't like to kind of push myself like that. I would much rather say, do do I feel like working all day or do I feel like working for a few hours? And if I usually do, if the scenes are fun and good and exciting.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I have to rethink the scenes. And then if I'm tired or have a headache or something, then I will just go on eBay. That's my favorite thing to do because it inspires me. Like I found this coin that is so amazing on eBay. And it just like kind of sparks, um, it sparks creativity. This is a coin that the Woolsey women, I read that they carried this coin and it said it's an enslaved woman with her hands up like this in chains, and it says, "Am I not a woman?" And um, I love this token and the fact that they carried these, and I found one on eBay. So when I get a little bit like I don't feel like writing, I just do that. Don't tell my husband though, because then he feels bad that the UPS men have to come to our house so much. So because we live out, in kind of a rural area. So
I won't tell. But I think that's really interesting. Both things are really interesting. That the discrete nature of a scene I think is really helpful in like just talking yourself through it, because you know that it's just one piece of a larger project. And then I also find objects really useful and like whatever,
do
like our
you really?
relationship with objects is, yeah, it's just like they have a life of their own. And if you can kind of like, I don't know, sort of talk to them or listen to them, it kind of opens things up.
Yes, yes, they're alive in a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish we had more time to talk about all this. It's so
I think
you're
we've run out
so
of time. I'm supposed to. This has been such a wonderful. I'm so grateful to you for this conversation, and I'm thrilled that I had the opportunity to talk to you. So
you were amazing. I'm
run,
so grateful
run,
to
don't
you.
walk. Go get it. No, well, not you, but everybody else. Thank you very much. And I'll stop the broadcast now and say goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Bye, guys.